this is Dmitry, and I've decided to devote this video to the discussion of Carl Jung's work. But not specifically Carl Jung's work, but rather something that I've heard recently, which I really hope isn't a very prevalent idea. And this is the notion that Carl Jung's work has been scientifically disproven. Now, I'm just making this video to say that personally, Jung's work, I think, is, in my life, totally indispensable. I don't know where I'd be without it. There have been many errors that I might have made in my life that could have been prevented had I known more about his theories, had I known more about all of the brilliant insight that he had into the unconscious. What bothers me so much is not so much that people seem to feel that his work has been disproven, which I'll go into talking in a moment. What bothers me is that it was discontinued, and I feel like this is almost kind of a warning. It may sound somewhat paranoid, but this is a warning that I have to my fellow human beings, whoever it is who's individually watching this video. Jung warned very carefully against the spreading mass-mindedness that has been noticeable even as early as the 19th century, which was noted by Kierkegaard, which was noted by Nietzsche, which was noted by, later on in the next century, by Aldous Huxley, by Alan Watts, by all of the existentialist philosophers. This is incredible to this is incredible to notice, because when I hear someone say to me that Carl Jung's work has been scientifically disproven, I think, prove that. Prove it to me. Give me some evidence. Give me something scientifically. And once I've lived with it for a few months, once I've deconstructed it, once I've reconstructed it, once I've gone through all of that, I may still say that you're wrong. Because the thing is, there seems to be this prejudice that anecdotal evidence is of no value in our modern day. In other words, that science has the truth. You know, you've heard about that, the truth. It used to be religion had the truth, now it's science, scientific community. And I'm not going to give you a bunch of mysticism or anything of that nature. I mean, if you have prejudices against me, I know better than to go about disproving it. I don't know if you have prejudices against my yoga beard or whatever. But I think I should provide some insight into a little bit about my background with Jung. Jung, I'd encountered, like many people did, through a Wikipedia article when I was in high school, and I thought, none of this stuff seems to make any sense. How could this possibly be true? And the more that I've been thinking over my life, I realize, how could I have overlooked this? It's so incredibly, obviously true, what he's talking about. But, again, what bothers me is not that people are questioning his theories and building on them, but rather that they're discontinuing them. And here's the notion that science can disprove something. Now, first of all, let me deal a bit more with that point that I was getting at, though, about anecdotal evidence. Evidence from individual experience as opposed to evidence from scientific authority and orthodoxy. We're in a very dangerous situation if we value any kind of absolute binding universal truth over anecdotal evidence. If I'm having a conversation with you, for instance, this is going to sound narcissistic, but hold on, let me say both halves of it. I should be the most important person to you, and here's the non-narcissistic part, you're going to be the most important person to me if I'm talking to you. Now, that's not to say that I'm necessarily going to treat you in the way that you expect to be treated. It's not to say that I won't talk to you about things which are on my mind. But I depend upon you. So your anecdotal experience, especially when it's most unique, most peculiarly you about it, that's going to be central. That is going to be essential. And I can always escape that responsibility by saying, okay, I've gone too far. I'm gonna go back into my own mind and my own thinking and everything that I think is common sense, everything that I think is a universally binding truth. Basically, all of my interpretations about what? All my own personal interpretations of what I've heard, what I project onto other people, which I think I share in common with them, which in fact I don't, because I'm different. And every one of us is different. Any kind of evidence we find is always going to be anecdotal. Because even if you appeal to the authority of science, that set of symbols in your mind, which represents science, is in your mind. It's not the same thing that's going on in someone else's consciousness, I can almost guarantee you. But I don't know if you could prove it. Now here's the problem, though, with scientific orthodoxy. And this is not a problem at all inherent to the process of science. In fact, Jung himself regarded himself as a scientist. He said, very wisely, that the scientific method's purpose is to serve, it errs when it usurps a throne. Brilliant. Science is something that goes on in your head, right? Now what happens if you tell me, this is a fact, this has been proven, and I tell you I don't believe you? You say, well, you have to believe me, because science. So basically, in logic, we call this an appeal to authority and an appeal to mass opinion, if a lot of people believe this. Now, what you would do, you're condoning by doing that, and what I would be condoning by accepting that, would be to say, okay, I will allow this to spread as an orthodoxy without thinking through it by myself. And this is how mass-mindedness works. This is how ideologies spread. Historically, we know this. Be they religious, political, or scientific. They all have this truth. And even if scientists doing psychological research have very good intentions, they're still humanly fallible. And they're still apt to create their theories based upon a set of cultural prejudices and according to fashion. Whatever is fashionable, what we have defined as being good science at this time in human history, which is always being reevaluated by scientists, by researchers, by philosophers. Now, I've watched a video called The Science Delusion, which was a banned TED Talk by a researcher criticizing some of the things in science, some popular myths which he himself did decades of work to get to the bottom of. And what did he find? He found that his ideas were shot down and the TED Talk was banned. This information was not spreading because it was part of a dissent. Think about that for a bit. And now think about what I'm thinking about, which is Nazism, Soviet Russia, totalitarianism. It may sound funny, but do understand, my parents came from the Soviet Union. I've been around people who grew up in that kind of culture. And mind you, my parents are also scientists, so maybe I do have a bit of a bias against a certain kind of scientist. But do understand that whatever the integrity of the scientist, if you don't do your own research, your opinion is always going to be secondhand at best. And with psychology especially, anecdotal evidence, it's right there. It's your mind. You can do the research with it. Do understand that. I know I sound pedantic. I'm hoping to see some dissent to this because I'm coming on a bit strong, I know. But dissent is much better than just the same old dogma over and over and over again. Now here I'm going to come around to Jung. Jung's notion was that the conscious can become one-sided, and he knew that this consciousness could become inflated in people in power, and they would therefore govern the consciousness of other people. When you tell me, believe this because it's science, you're telling me basically to have my consciousness mirror your consciousness. And so the whole thing can be reduced to just one anecdotal experience, which is I have my consciousness and my unconscious, and I have to figure out what to do about it, and that's all I have. Because the fact that a large number of people believe it doesn't mean anything if I'm compelled to believe it because of an appeal to mass opinion. Because if that's so, then that either creates a situation where a lot of people believe something just because, or it perpetuates that situation. So I have every reason to be skeptical. And what I do to break out of this mass-mindedness, make sure that my thoughts are really my thoughts. I question them, I entertain different things, I see what works for me, and then I know that it works. Because it's much more real to me than anything else out there, which is really just in here, which is really just what I have, how I've made sense of this world of information personally as an individual. If I do not do that, by Jungian standards, I'm neurotic. And there is a parallel to be drawn between science, the method of science, and the formation of a delusion in such a case. Not in all cases, but in relation to the mind, it's really incredible. Because science is a function of consciousness. We do not know what the unconscious's relationship to consciousness is, what its attitude is, because it's definitionally unconscious. But we can do research into it. And when I hear that the psychological community is discontinuing even teaching Jung's theories, which are, to my mind, the most comprehensive theory we've ever had into the psyche, into the study of the soul, psychology. It's not just the study of the mind, the conscious mind, it's also the whole psyche, the unconscious, everything. And when I hear that people who are just finishing up psychology have only in college have only studied, like, I've been studying like neuroscience the whole time, I think, that's great. That's great that you can have an objective outside view, but what about the subjective view? How do we even know that the mind is confined to the brain? It's an easy way out. A neurotically easy way out, I think. Because if you can reduce all science to an aspect of consciousness, and mind you, Jung did employ science a good deal. At least he felt that his work was scientific. I certainly feel like it was scientific. Then, the moment that you allow yourself, according to this process, to say the unconscious is like nothing, or it can just be understood entirely in terms of conscious theories, which he did have. He just didn't want them to become orthodoxies. They didn't want them to be approached as orthodoxies and disproven. You've really just, potentially screwed yourself. And this may sound like Pascal's wager. It may sound like this is a religious argument. This is saying, look, you have to have faith because what if you're wrong? But I have to say, from my personal experience, I do have a lot of faith in Jung, and I'll keep crusading for his work because for me, with philosophy, with inquiry, and probably with science itself, I can't imagine where I'd be without his work. And I'll still be revisiting it over and over and over again. I hope I can make it a topic of conversation with intelligent people rather than being shot down as merely something that's been disproven. So that's my rant. Thank you for listening.